Reagan. I think we were about right here. I kind of didn't pay attention to the last one and kind of cut me off. Sorry. We kind of were talking about Reaganomics, supply side economics. We've been talking a lot about the fact that Ronald Reagan, neoconservative, is going to favor smaller government. And of course, with that government, he is going to favor less taxes. And it's supposed to be less spending. And he does do less spending on what kind of programs? Do you remember? Social programs. A lot of welfare programs are being cut. Again, Reagan, a lot of your conservatives are going to believe that it's not the government's job to help you off of your fallen place. It is your job to help you up from your fallen place. They might help you a little bit, but they don't want to help you too much. They think that government is doing too much, spending too much money. And so with that, they say it's more personal responsibility. Something that the silent majority, I think their ears perked up at and they very much liked. With that, we talked about Reaganomics. Now, Reaganomics, supply side economics, is a cut of how much percent in taxes? Do you remember? 25% in taxes. And of course, if you're going to cut taxes, you got to cut spending. And he did cut spending, but he also increased it in one area because it's the Cold War still. It's military. So the gains of Reaganomics, inflation and unemployment declined by 1990, 16 new million jobs. That was awesome. Unemployment was at 6%. But here's the deal. It only will maintain until they raise the taxes. And when you build debt, you have to raise taxes, unfortunately. And Daddy Bush actually is going to have that bite him in the butt. Now, with that, the losses of Reaganomics, of course, is that increasing social equality because there's no social programs anymore, there's no great society, and also huge federal deficits. And this is about where I need to have it to show you the U.S. budget deficits 1980 to 1997. Take a look at this. In 1980, we were running a deficit of about $75 billion. This is a reverse chart. Zero's up here. Now, with that, as Reagan's tenure goes on into the 80s, you'll see the budget deficits are growing. In fact, they get very, very high around 85 and 86. Because Reagan is going to try and be very, very strong on communism. Reagan is actually going to have credited to his name ending the Cold War of some of the stuff that he did. But it takes money. And so he does run deficits. So that's going to be a problem. In 1976, the first year of Carter, okay, it was $70 billion deficit. In 1983, third year of Reagan, that deficit had climbed to $207 billion. So did Reagan cut spending? No. He didn't at all. He increased it. And he cut taxes, which means now we are even more in debt. So with that, the other thing is oh yeah, that's kind of scary. 1988, 44 or 20% of foreigners controlled 20% of the national debt. The one last thing that you need to get on your notes in this three little box area is the Graham-Rudman Act of 1985. And all you need to put is created budget ceiling and set 1993 as the target date to end the federal deficit. As you can see, this is 1993 right here. Did we end the deficit here? Ooh, no. In fact, the worst year on this chart is 1992. So that's a problem. But remember, there's actually going to be a war going on here. Operation Desert Storm. We'll get to that in a little bit. But long story short, a lot of the times people will say supply side economics is absolutely amazing. Some people say it's absolutely the worst idea in the world. I think it's a little bit of both. I think the idea is nice, cut taxes, let the people spend their money. However, if you cut taxes and you don't cut spending, it's going to be a nightmare. The other thing is that they oftentimes cut taxes a little bit for the wealthier, and you take a look at this, the rich get richer at the expense of the poor and the middle class. These are the quintiles of the American population from 1975, 85, and 95. As you can clearly see, the rich, the highest quintile, is getting bigger. Okay, or I'm sorry, they're getting wealthier. With that, then you have the middle class right here, these three, middle 60%, nah, not so much. And the lowest class, the lower income, even smaller as well. The only people who are doing well in this economy is the rich. Rich get richer, poor get poorer. Now, there's a couple, good question. Quiz yourself. Pause it. I hope you came up with C, cut taxes. So with that, the next thing we got here, we got to finish this domestic side out, is immigration of the 1980s. All I really want you to do is I want you to put third wave of American immigration began. You have a couple different waves. The first wave, of course, is, well, when we all came here. Early American, colonial immigration, if you will. Second wave probably going to be Gilded Age. This is where you're going to have, the Statue of Liberty. Give me you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor, you're huddled masses. The third wave is going to happen 1970s and 80s, and I am imagining you can tell me one group probably, because we do live in Texas, a border state. One group is going to be Mexican, Haitian, Dominican. You can just put Hispanic if you would like to. Immigration increased 20 to 30%. Actually ended up living in poverty, unfortunately. The interesting thing is this: if you look here, and you can just put rise of Hispanic immigration or Mexican immigration, the border states are the ones that, of course, jump the most. The other thing interesting is if you kind of cross-check this with some of the protest movements, UFW, Si Se Puede, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, the Chicano mural movement, that, of course, rises as immigration rises. Second group, Asian immigration. In all reality, we're going to focus on Korea, Vietnam, and the Philippines. They tended to thrive in America as opposed to some Hispanics who did not, who ended up being migrant farm workers, and that's why Cesar Chavez was doing what he was doing. So with that, kind of an interesting take on that third wave of immigration. So just kind of some interesting information there. Now, social programs. Do you think you should put a happy face or a sad face on there for Reagan? Probably a sad face, because he's cutting them. He's opposing them. So with that, he definitely takes money out. So some of the things you need to do, effects of social programs, being cut, high school dropout rate, and crime increases, because you got to think about it. If we no longer have funding for school, for Head Start, for free and reduced lunch, for urban mass transit, so everybody loses their job, all this kind of stuff like that, then what you're going to have is either kids drop out of school, or they lose their job, and then if you drop out of school or you lose your job, oftentimes you turn to a life of crime. So in the 1980s, high school dropout rates and crime both increased. Affirmative action and school busing programs to assist African Americans were limited, and women's abortion rights were attacked. Now, I went ahead and I made right here, affirmative action red. This is something that I don't think a lot of people understand, so I'm going to give you an assignment. I want you to look up what affirmative action is. And then you need to be able to tell me how it helps African Americans. I'm going to go ahead and state that. That's your job. You better be able to answer it. Now, the one thing that I will say that Reagan does do, landmark achievement, and I put it up in the top right-hand part of your notes, right here at the top right. First female SCOTUS. Of course, we know SCOTUS stands for Supreme Court of the United States. Reagan appoints the first female Supreme Court justice with Miss Sandra Day O'Connor, who, by the way, is possibly one of the best justices in American history. The EOC, the AP, loves to ask first. They want to know the first African American justice. Do you remember him? Argued for Brown versus Board of Education for Brown. Thurgood Marshall. Now you need to know the first female Supreme Court justice, Miss Sandra Day O'Connor. A lot of people think that he was pacifying the women's movement because, of course, he doesn't want the ERA, doesn't like Roe versus Wade, all this stuff like that, and he kind of making women mad a little bit. So a lot of people are like, oh, he put a woman on the court just to show that he liked women. And let me tell you something. If he did, that's fine with me because she was a freaking awesome justice. I'm just going to state that for the record. Interesting story. This is going to be the last Supreme Court justice you have to know. I'll go ahead and teach it to you now. The last Supreme Court justice that you have to know actually got their seat when Sandra Day O'Connor retired and gave up her seat. It's interesting that the first female justice, Sandra Day O'Connor, retired and her seat went to the first Hispanic female justice, Miss Sonia Sotomayor. So kind of interesting to know there. Now the next thing I got you going, down at the very end, University of Cali versus Bakke, 1978, and all you need to do is put ruled in favor of affirmative action, but not purely a quota system. That's all you need to write. And remember, it's your job to tell me when you come to class, what is affirmative action? You better be able to answer, and you might even want to take a look up this court case. I will tell you, it's kind of an interesting one because affirmative action is definitely something we still sometimes see in college admissions today. You know what? I don't even think I have room for this on this page. Y'all are going to be so mad at me. So what you can do is you can put it up in a little bit of the blank area in the top of the page if you want to. One other thing domestically that happens, unfortunately, with Reagan is the Challenger disaster. The space shuttle Challenger actually exploded upon launch, if you will. It broke apart 73 seconds into the flight, leading to the deaths of the 7 crew members. We'll talk about this on in class, to be honest with you. You just need to know. Put somewhere, Challenger exploded, unhappy face. Reagan really got a chance to be mourner in chief, sometimes we call him. Because he did such a good job in leading the nation with the death of these people. And the one thing I love about the Challenger crew, if you look at this picture right here, it's a diverse group. 2 women, 1 African American, and 1 Asian. It's starting to show what America is going to look like. It's beautiful. Last thing I want to add to this, you make sure you write the war on drugs somewhere. Just put war on drugs, big old circle. You might want to put Nancy Reagan says, just say no. This is when we start to see the First Lady kind of stepping up here. She's such a cute little lady. I think I got a picture of her here. Oh, obviously we're having some issues with Southern America, where the drugs are coming from. And criminal rates are starting to increase, which means drug rates. Miss Nancy Reagan is sent out to teach the kids, just say no. And on a real serious note, just say no. Seriously, it'll screw your life up. Crack cocaine had become massive. Federal government failed to stop the flow of the drugs into the U.S., so they sent out Nancy to say, just say no. The other thing we need to add, yeah, y'all might have to get on a new piece of paper. Yeah, you're probably going to. Or Post-it note. Post-it notes are your friend. With that, the first documented cases of AIDS occurred in the 1980s. First cases were among homosexual men in San Francisco and New York. So unfortunately, AIDS was typecasted into, if you have it, you're homosexual. This is going to cause a massive problem, because not only are we going to see a little bit of judgmental, okay, and stereotypical, but also you're going to see a lack of sympathy for anyone infected with HIV, a limited government response in order because of that limited that stereotypical, if you will. I hate saying that, but the government didn't want to be seen as for homosexuals, so they didn't really respond. Reagan, by the end of it, has to respond. Look at this. Jumps from 28,000 known AIDS in 83 to the end, you have 50,000. I mean, just spreading like wildfire. I can't talk today. By the end of 2006, there was over 1 million AIDS cases, and it's not until people start stepping up. Actually, the first massive mailing to every household was in 1988 about AIDS. It was a big step, actually. We'll read this brochure in class. The 1984 election. With that, we have Democrat Walter Mondale. Actually, this is something interesting. Very first female candidate on a presidential ticket, vice president, is what she's nominated for, Geraldine Ferraro. Attack Reagan deficits and promised to raise taxes to end the U.S. debts. Well, who do you think? You have somebody promising to raise your taxes, and somebody saying, no, I'm going to lower your taxes. Who won? Of course. Anyways, they loved him anyways. Reagan won in a landslide, attracting even more Reagan Democrats than 1980. Of course, again, his vice president, H.W. Bush, Daddy Bush. That was Geraldine Ferraro right there, America's first woman vice president. Did not win, though. Oop, ouch. Even Georgia. Yep. Minnesota and D.C. That's it. That is a Reagan revolution. All right, foreign policy. Tune in next time.